Amigas y amigos de Cartago, otro encuentro en nuestra casa de metro, nuestra casa adoptiva que hemos tomado ahí por asalto en estas pequeñas grajeas que tenemos. Hoy vamos a estar en esta casa en la que también nos sentimos y que nos ha acompañado en estos tiempos para hacer entrevistas. Por ahí salimos un poco afuera en estos días, pero tiene mucho que ver con lo que está sucediendo en este momento en Latinoamérica, fundamentalmente en Chile. Hay un material que tiene que ver con uno de los libros más importantes para entender la filosofía neoliberal, si pudiera ser una filosofía o pudiéramos darle el rango de filosofía al neoliberalismo, pero creo que el trabajo que ha hecho Naomi Klein sobre la doctrina del shock nos parece importantísimo hoy darle este soporte audiovisual. Este es un trabajo que tiene que ver con una conferencia que ella da relatando el libro, contándolo, presentándolo, y con un injerto documental que nos lleva a la aparición bifronte del neoliberalismo a través de la Thatcher en los 70, en la cual va a haber una referencia obligada a la guerra de Malvinas, a la heroica huelga minera y a lo que tiene que ver con la desaparición del estado de bienestar prácticamente en Inglaterra, y el bombardeo a la Casa de la Moneda. Las dos miradas que hay para la llegada del neoliberalismo, una en lo que sería el centro de poder como es Inglaterra, y otra en la periferia como era el gobierno de Salvador Allende, los 1000 días de la Unidad Popular, que terminan con el bombardeo de la Casa de la Moneda en esa etapa tan triste de la cual Chile se está despertando. ¿Por qué digo se está despertando? Porque gran parte de los movimientos que hoy están convulsionando y saliendo a la calle en la heroica Chile, la heroica Santiago, los heroicos pueblos que salen a la calle frente a una represión salvaje de carabineros, tiene un epítome en la despedida de Salvador Allende, cuando dice: más tarde que temprano se abrirán las grandes alamedas. Esto nos parecía un punto de partida importantísimo para abrir este documental que hoy compartimos acá en nuestra pantalla, basado en el libro de Naomi Klein, La doctrina del shock, precisamente hablando de la llegada del neoliberalismo a esta parte del mundo. Sean bienvenidos.
A state of shock is not just what happens to us when something bad happens. It's what happens to us when we lose our narrative, when we lose our story, when we become disoriented. What keeps us oriented and alert and out of shock is our history. So a period of crisis like the one we're in is a very good time to think about history, to think about continuities, to think about roots. It's a good time to place ourselves in the longer human story of struggle.
The story begins on June 1st, 1951, when representatives of Western intelligence agencies secretly met with academics at Montreal's Ritz-Carlton Hotel. This meeting contributed to military-funded research into the effects of sensory deprivation at McGill University.
Sensory deprivation really is a way of producing extreme monotony. It causes loss of critical capacity. The thinking is less clear. The subject complains that he can't even daydream. When you have college students that can't daydream, they're in a bad way. I began to think while we were doing our experiments that it's possible that something that involves physical discomfort or even pain might be more tolerable than simply the deprivation conditions that we studied.
Hebb decided to stop work on the research.
But I had no idea when I suggested that what a vicious weapon, potentially vicious weapon, this could be.
These are the days and ours are the occasions.
But experiments at McGill continued under the ambitious head of psychiatry, Dr. Ewan Cameron.
What he did was much more than what we had done. We did our work strictly with the understanding that the subject could get up and walk out at any point he wished to, and some of them did.
Cameron's patients were not so lucky. The Allen Memorial Institute, where he worked, began to resemble a macabre prison, where Cameron performed bizarre experiments on his psychiatric patients. Cameron wanted to de-pattern or wipe clean his patient's mind, so he could rebuild them from a blank slate. Janine Huard was a young mother of 4, suffering from postnatal depression.
I used to shiver when they told me about, you're going to get a shock treatment tomorrow. I used to shiver. I was so scared of it. And I would wake up in another room, all mixed up and sad, and it used to make me very sad after. You're just like a zombie walking around.
Cameron combined shock therapy with sleep therapy and the repeated playing of taped messages.
It says, Janine, Janine, you are running away from your responsibility. You don't want to take care of your husband and children. All the time, the same thing.
It sounds like you were being interrogated.
Yes, interrogation, but for what purpose?
It wasn't long before the CIA put Cameron's research into practice. Many of his techniques appear in the agency's Kubat Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual. These words are from the manual.
It's a fundamental hypothesis of this handbook that these techniques are in essence methods of inducing regression of the personality. There is an interval, which may be extremely brief, of suspended animation, a kind of psychological shock or paralysis. Experienced interrogators recognize this effect when it appears, and know that at this moment the source is far more open to suggestion, far likelier to comply than he was just before he experienced the shock.
At the same time as Ewan Cameron was conducting his experiments in Montreal, an exponent of another kind of shock was working not so far away. Milton Friedman was teaching economics at the University of Chicago. He believed economic shock therapy could encourage societies to accept a purer form of deregulated capitalism. In October 2008, in the midst of the biggest financial crisis since 1929, Naomi Klein went to the University of Chicago to talk about Milton Friedman.
When Milton Friedman turned 90, the Bush White House held a birthday party for him. And everyone made speeches, including George Bush. But there was a really good speech that was given by Donald Rumsfeld. My favorite quote in that speech from Rumsfeld is this. He said, "Milton is the embodiment of the truth that ideas have consequences." What I want to argue here is that the economic chaos that we're seeing right now on Wall Street and on Main Street and in Washington stems from many factors, of course, but among them are the ideas of Milton Friedman.
The Wall Street crash of 1929 led to the Depression of the 30s. Central to Friedman's thesis was his opposition to the New Deal, announced by President Franklin Roosevelt in his inaugural speech.
Our greatest primary task is to put people to work. This is no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Influenced by the economist John Maynard Keynes, Roosevelt started a program of public employment to get people back to work.
Today, depression is a fading memory. Millions of men and women have found employment, and with it, confidence and hope.
It wasn't that simple. The Depression lasted into World War II. But after the war, the Marshall Plan spread Keynes's model of government regulation and intervention to Europe. His principles were widely accepted, but not in the economics department of the University of Chicago.
Milton Friedman from this university waged a war against the New Deal.
Friedman was a member of a group called the Montpellier Society, led by the Austrian economist Friedrich von Hayek. They believed that if governments stopped providing services and stopped regulating markets, the economy would correct itself. In the 50s, they were seen as cranks, but over the last 30 years, their ideas have become the dominant economic doctrine.
The thesis of the shock doctrine is that we've been sold a fairy tale about how these radical policies have swept the globe. That they haven't swept the globe on the backs of freedom and democracy, but they have needed shocks, they have needed crises, they have needed states of emergencies. Milton Friedman understood the utility of crisis. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around.
It was in Chile that Friedman's disciples first learned how to exploit a large-scale shock or crisis.
Usually the official storytellers of neoliberalism, the official publicists, don't even mention Chile. They start the story with Thatcher and Reagan because it's much more flattering that way.
In the 50s and 60s, Chile's progressive developmental policies were a beacon in the region. The government invested in health, education and industry. American corporations were worried their investments would suffer. In response, the US State Department began sponsoring students from Chile and the rest of South America to study free market economics with Milton Friedman.
The University of Chicago had a joint arrangement with the Catholic University of Chile, under which a great many Chilean students came to the University of Chicago, were trained by us and received PhDs.
These students went back and taught in Chile. The Catholic University Economics Department in Santiago became a little Chicago school. Arnold Harberger, the economist in charge of the program, described himself as a seriously dedicated missionary. In 1970, Salvador Allende's Popular Unity government won the election on a platform of nationalization of large sectors of the economy. Chile's phone company was majority owned by the US corporation ITT. It spearheaded attempts to stop Allende becoming president. It had the support of Richard Nixon in the White House.
I was not there, but I can tell you what we now know to be a fact. He ordered the CIA to prevent Allende from assuming the presidency. And indeed, they tried to get me to lean on the Chilean military right after Allende was elected.
Despite the efforts of the CIA, Allende was sworn in as president. Richard Nixon ordered the CIA director to make the economy scream.
Señor Nixon es presidente de Estados Unidos y yo soy presidente de Chile. Yo no tendré un término despectivo contra el señor Nixon mientras el señor Nixon respete al presidente de Chile.
Preparations began for the military coup. The Chilean Chicago boys started work on a 500-page economic blueprint called the BRIC. With US funding, everything was done to destabilize the economy. Truck drivers went on strike, bringing factories and shops to a standstill. There was a failed coup attempt on June the 29th, 1973. And then on September the 11th, with General Pinochet leading the army, the assault began on the presidential palace. Chile had enjoyed 41 years of uninterrupted, peaceful democratic rule. Now it was being violently overthrown. Pinochet and his supporters described the coup as a war. It was certainly designed to look like one. It was a Chilean precursor to shock and awe.
Fuerzas Armadas y de Orden solo bajo la inspiración patriótica de sacar al país del caos que en forma aguda lo estaba precipitando el gobierno marxista de Salvador Allende.
The Chicago boys delivered their economic blueprint, the brick to Pinochet. In the days that followed, more than 13,000 opponents were arrested and imprisoned. Thousands of prisoners were held in the National Stadium. Many were tortured. Chile became notorious around the world.
¿Cuántas personas?